And so what we're doing, and we're kicking off in this Black History Month, is a discussion of the state of condition that we're in and a 100-year plan. Now that 100-year plan, we have the hubris of planning for 100 years because Africa in 2013 planned for a 50-year plan for the unification. We were there. We were called to Africa by the African Union. It's the 55 nations of Africa created an organization just like the European Union. So, okay, let's get to it. By the way, all this, you want to read information on this, you could go to friendsoftheafricanunion.com. Let's go back to 1968. Okay, in 1968, the President of the United States issued an executive order that established 11-member National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders. Now remember, in 1968, we had just gotten our American rights as citizens enforced by the federal government. Now, officially in 1868, on the 14th Amendment, a lot of Irishmen, a lot of Germans, expression Deutsch, okay, they didn't speak English, but they were not Americans, and they were in New York, and they were in Pennsylvania, but they weren't Americans, and the 14th Amendment made them citizens because they were born here, and they were here. That was the 14th Amendment. That also took our ancestors who were slaves, okay, and made them, but it just wasn't just us. The 14th Amendment just wasn't for Black people. It was for a whole bunch of white people, okay, who became American citizens in 1868. But our case is interesting in this, is that when they became American citizens, they had their full rights enforced by the federal government. When you know, the United States, and we go back to this in 1788, when the Constitution was ratified, okay, and went in effect in 1789. Okay, it wasn't 1776. Okay, so when it went into effect, it went into effect in the United States based on two principal actions that made America great during the first time. One, we took the indigenous people's land. Okay, that was going back to 1492, when the Roman Catholic Church said, hey, if you go into another land and there's some people there and they're not Roman Catholic, then you can take their land because you have the right of God, because I am the victor on earth. I'm the Pope. Okay, I speak for God on earth. You're my subject, and you have the right to designate Christopher Columbus, okay, as we call him, to go over and take some other people's land in the search for a means to get to India. Well, that was called the right of discovery. And so America was discovered. And when America was discovered, okay, we had, along with there, people from Africa. Why? Because Christopher Columbus, because they knew how to cross the ocean. Okay, because they were master navigators, because the human race came out of Africa. And these master navigators had been going around the world, okay, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so they were the navigator, okay, that brought the Europeans to the Americas. And the Spanish and Portuguese, who came in early 1500s, okay, brought slaves with them. Now, the slavery of that day is not the slavery of America, all right? It was a slavery. You got to remember, there's different types of slavery, okay, that all throughout the ages. And slavery as an institution up until this day, it is into effect. As a matter of fact, I guess there's about 40 million slaves around the world right now, and we'll get into that in the second part, talking about the United Nations and the African Union. But the key thing is that many of those slaves who came with the Europeans escaped, and or the Europeans died and they survived, and they down through generations, okay, became mixed in with the indigenous people. But the indigenous people in North America, in the United States, they lost their battles. I mean, they lost their battles all throughout the Americas. But here in the United States, with the landing of 1619, the English Europeans, okay, they took this land, okay, and when they originally landed, you could be a European or an African, and you could be in bondage for a certain period of time, and then you won your freedom. But what happened by the late 1600s is that it started to move from racism. And so the racism said, well, if you're a European, you're in bondage, you can go free. If you're African, you can't. And, you know, eventually what it came to be is the dehumanization of the African people in the Americas. Now, remember, in Africa, okay, the people who were sold to the Europeans, okay, were sold by other Africans and Arabs. Okay, like myself, I'm a descendant from Nubia, okay, in East Africa, but the Arabs traded my great descendants from East Africa through the Salt and into West Africa and then into the Americas, where, okay, what happened here is that the masters in the European America, they took their slave women, raped them, bore their children, and then enslaved their children. It was just history. Okay, there's a history that we needed to talk about because it brings us forward back to 1968, 50 years ago. But it is history since the creation of the country in 1788. That fast forward in terms of the country being created and established in 1789 with a constitution that carried out slavery and the importation of Africans into slavery until 1808. Okay, and then after 1808, you couldn't legally import slaves. Okay, and so when the whole idea of slavery is based on economics, and again, the economics of slavery is what made America great. Okay, we became a world power through two actions, taking Native American land and through slavery. Now, the inventiveness of the American charter, well, we invented a whole lot in our Revolutionary War. We invented a new way of carrying out war, guerrilla war. It had never been done before, and we had shown the European knew, okay, guerrilla war. Don't stand up, march, and with the new muskets, okay, get killed en masse, but rather hide behind a rock, a tree, over the hill, the crest of the military. We showed a new way, and we persevered through a long campaigns that England, it became economically unfeasible for England to carry out this war. The King of England had all these maimed and wounded soldiers and not coming back. Then they hired mercenaries like from the Germans, and when they raised them, Mein Herren, came here, and General Washington had the brilliant stroke of saying, hey, we'll give you a whole bunch of land if you desert. And, in Pennsylvania, there's a whole bunch of land owned by German descendant people. Okay. So in that regards, what Friends of the African Union is that we're teaching you this history because it has relevance to where we are in 2018. Okay, so now we go into the great debates leading up to the Civil War. We have the Civil War, they killed Lincoln, okay, and now we have in 1868, we have now the 14th Amendment. Well, the 14th Amendment was good, and we needed the 14th Amendment for America, but we got shortchanged. We didn't get the same ability to take that land that the European settlers did. Okay, the Great Land Rush, we weren't part of that. We legally couldn't. They said, no, y'all can't do that. Okay, and the agriculture. Okay, because remember in what happened at the end of the Civil War in 1865, all these plantations in the South that were growing cotton and had all this infrastructure, it was only valuable because they had slaves who were valued from their birth to their death. Okay. And so, you know, in the prime years for a woman, whether she was breeding or she was out in the field, they had a rating system for that. We don't have to guess. Okay, this is all history. All right. And so as a result of that, in 1865, when slavery was ended, there was a massive depression. Okay, there was war destruction, but this wasn't just a depression in the South, because remember, slavery was in all states, even during the period of the rise of the Republican Party up north. Cotton was king. And the way cotton was king is that now you could grow America, we grew cotton. And when we grew cotton, okay, that means that Joe Laborer, instead of having his wife and daughters and, you know, having to take the cotton and spin it and having to make it to make your clothes, you now could go and buy it at a mill, at a store. Okay, that was revolutionary. And remember that this continent was being explored as a way to go, because remember, the earth was flat back in the 13th, 14th century. And so the whole idea is that you could sail and you could get to India. And in India, okay, was, okay, what? Cotton, okay, and spices, and you could get there and you could feed the industrial mills. Well, here was this cotton. And you know, you could grow the spices by having this slave infrastructure. You could grow the cotton by having this slave infrastructure. But 1865, it was all over. We're in depression. Now you've got these agricultural workers who have skills. I mean, you know, remember who rebuilt the White House after they burned it down? We have skills, and we have agricultural skills. I mean, over 200,000 of us had, our ancestors had military skills because they served in the Union Army. Over 200,000. 20,000 of them served in the Union Navy. Okay, and so we had all sorts of skills that now were competing with out-of-work Europeans. But what was passed at that time on the 14th Amendment, okay, brought all those European workers who were not American workers into America's workforce. And so by 1877, those times of Reconstruction in the South had passed away, and they had cut a deal. Okay, and President Hayes cut a backroom deal and withdrew the soldiers from the South, and times of tribulation were upon us. Okay, and by the way, because of that Civil War, okay, we had introduced the new usage of machine guns, the Maxim and other weapons of mass destruction. that the Europeans, when they were watching the war, because it was a thing that up through World War I, that you were able to go with a warring class, and that you were able to send your observers to see how they conducted war, but you weren't part of them. Okay, and so the Europeans had watched us conduct war, and see, they were over in the African continent for a couple hundred years and had not been able to conquer Africa. They've been able to trade in human slavery and spices and et cetera. Don't forget that the intermarrying, when we talked about the prince in England marrying a African American, or excuse me, a woman of African descent, that happened in the 13th century. Okay, all right, it's already been there, already done happen. Okay, and so what had happened now is that the Europeans have found out to carry out wars of mass destruction. And so where Africans had a move where 100 Africans may go after a European armed with a musket, okay, armed with a repeating rifle, now they had to deal with a European armed with a machine gun. So